Welcome back to another episode of the Odd or God Pod, where we talk about sobriety, spirituality, and everything in between, powered by Plugged In Recovery. Guys, this week we have a very special episode. Our guest I've known for quite some time. Back in the day in my late high school years, I worked with him, worked for him. He was my manager. And we shared a lot of cool experiences during that time. And I reflect back on that era of my life, and there's so many things that I've taken with me that I could still, when I hear a certain song or I think about something, I can almost teleport back to that moment in time and remember where I was at in those younger years. And over the years, we kind of lost contact, and I started doing this podcast, and I started putting stuff out there, and he reached back out to me, and then I learned that he himself had been sober for the past 7 years, and he had this incredible story about these book of poetry that he had published, and just a lot of cool things that he's been doing in his own life. And I said, this is a perfect opportunity to have him on the pod, reconnect with him, and show you guys, what's worked for him. We have a lot of guests on that do the 12-step programs. He's found something a little different that has worked for him that I think could be beneficial for a lot of people. And another cool fact, before I stop rambling and let him introduce himself, he's actually a bartender. So he's a full-time bartender, been sober for the past 7 years. And I think he's got a very interesting perspective on what sobriety looks like for him and all of the cool things that has happened in his life. And I hope you guys enjoy this as much as I'm about to. So without further ado, I would like to let him introduce himself. This is Mike Martin.
Thank you. Mike Martin. I do bartend. I am sober. I have been sober for, I think I'm coming up on 7 years. It was 2018, September 2018. And how I got sober was through Landmark.
Yeah.
Which was introduced to me by my fiance about 30 days before we found out she was pregnant.
Wow.
So I quit 30 days before my kid was, before we were aware she was on the way. And that was great motivation to stay sober, but I think we'll get into Landmark later.
Yeah, we'll get into Landmark. We'll obviously we'll learn a little bit about your story. We'll touch on Landmark because I think that's going to be a great resource for a lot of people. And then we're going to roll in. We've got some cool stuff to talk about with these couple books of poems. I'm going to read one for you guys. It's going to be a cool experience. So before we get into all of that, why don't we just touch a little on what your life looked like prior to you deciding to get sober, and a little bit about what life is like now.
Okay. Had my first beer when I was 13, had my last beer when I was 38. So 25 years of life with alcohol. And it's progressive, right? So it started off as one beer, and then the weekends. I grew up in northern New Hampshire, which is close to the Canadian border, so we could drink over there at an earlier age, legally at 18, but we could get up there at 16 and pass through and drink at clubs. By the end of it, I was drinking Jaeger bombs just to feel good, I think, just to feel better. Waking up hungover all the time. When I stopped drinking, it took me 6 weeks to stop shaking. So that was significant to me. That said a lot to me about how life was going and the health issues related to it. I used to throw up a lot. And I was proud like 8 months into sobriety when I had not thrown up for like ever. So health issues, holding down jobs. I held down a job, but just didn't seem to ever get really anywhere. So that's what life was like.
Yeah. And you touched on it. You decided you had your last drink 30 days before you knew that your wife was pregnant. And then touch on how you were able to navigate that, because it's a stressful time, I would imagine, like when you have a baby on the way, trying to figure out and prepare for that. But you were also in your first 6 to 9 months of sobriety at that time simultaneously. What was that experience like?
Yeah, well, like I had said, it was just great motivation to stay sober. So, she said, I followed you around for 30 days. Now you can follow me around for 30 days. We hadn't known each other that long. And so she said we would do it together, and we have. And so I quit for 30 days, which was my last beer was the day that I signed up for the Landmark Forum.
Wow.
And so I stayed sober for 30 days and then entered the Landmark Forum. And then, so it might have been 30 days after that we found out she was pregnant. But either way, the first couple months. So really just knowing that she was pregnant was great motivation to stay on the path of sobriety.
Yeah.
And it really was probably was not as stressful for me maybe as for her, but she also obviously had that motivation to stay sober because she was pregnant.
Yeah. That's a good reason to stay sober.
Yeah.
Some would say.
Yes.
Maybe every medical professional.
So having her there and doing it together was huge because I knew that I would not be able to do it alone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's always good to have a good support system. And, that's interesting because you hear that a lot. People find out they have a kid on the way, mostly with females, and they're able to string together some sobriety time, to take care of that. So that's cool that was also part of your story, man. And you touched on it that you enrolled in the Landmark Forum. Before we get into what it's done for you, why don't we just take some time to give you, a platform to talk about what Landmark is? Because it's not just a tool that people use to get sober. It's more of just like empowerment. It's more about just advancing yourself in life and becoming like a more productive, better version of yourself. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. There's a saying behind Landmark that you can go into it expecting to get something out of it, and you get completely something different. So for me, I didn't even go into it with the thought that I would stop drinking forever and be sober. I just thought, how can I be a more productive human? How can I be more effective in life, in communication, and things like that? And so I ended up getting sobriety out of it, or the possibility of staying sober came from it. One thing in Landmark that they talk about, so Landmark Forum is a discussion. It's guidance rather than lectures. It's a discussion rather than lecture. It's transformational learning rather than informational learning. So with informational learning, you just add things to what you already know. And with transformational learning, you can take things and discover it for what it is and for what you made it mean. And you can just let it be there. And from a standpoint of basically nothingness, you can create a new life or a new possibility. So one thing that we talk about is a blind spot. A blind spot is something you didn't know. So there's things you know, there's things you don't know. As in, I know how to drive a car, and I know the rules of a baseball game. I don't know fluent German or Spanish. What do you do with the things you know? Well, you use them every day, right? And the things you don't know, what do you do with those? You can choose to learn them or just continue not knowing them. Now you take the things you didn't know. Such as, for me, when I was a child, 5 or 8 or whatever it was, my parents split up. And they said, we're splitting up. We're not going to be together anymore. You're going to go live with your mom. And it's not your fault. It's not your fault that we're splitting up. And there's also nothing you can do about it. Mm-hmm. So what do I do with that? Well, it turns out, as I looked back and discovered for myself, that one of the things I might have done with that is I used it in every situation and every event that occurred in my life thereafter. So it's not my fault and there's nothing I can do about it. So what do you want me to do about it? In relationships, in work, if you come to me and say, I'm showing up late and I say, well, that's not my fault. That's not my problem. I need you to be here. There's nothing I can do about that. You need to show up on time. Mm-hmm. It's not my fault that you're late. But what if I discovered that I could take responsibility for your being late, and I could say, well, maybe there is something I can do about it. Maybe I can have better communication with you, more effective communication that allows you to understand why we need to be here on time and what the results of you being here on time will look like. The possibilities that you're here on time means we can have a better sales during lunch or whatever it is. So taking responsibility and discovering for yourself that there was a situation that happened and you made it mean something. And then taking that meaning that you discovered for yourself as being bullshit, right? Yeah. Like my parents splitting up, maybe it had something to do with me, maybe it didn't, but it doesn't matter. And from that standpoint of what I used to say, oh, it's not my fault, there's nothing I can do about it. This is just the way I am and there's nothing that's going to change. And standing on that standpoint as that being nothing, then I can create all these possibilities of, oh, maybe I am adequate. Maybe I can do something about it. And, maybe it is my fault. So I can take responsibility for that and we can move forward.
Dude, and I love that because that's something that I've been learning a lot about too over the years that I've been living in recovery and trying to explore different ways. And I do think that what you're touching on is a huge thing. I do a lot of meditation and I've been coming really big on that. And it's like I've been like with the principles of separating the self from the non-self, and then also just understanding like a big part of what I like to do with my breathing exercises. And when I do my meditations, I do like 20 to 30 minute sits every day. And I try to contemplate on things happening in my life and then just understand that what you were touching on is they're just events, right? They're not good or bad. They're not positive or negative, but it's the perception that I designate to that event that becomes my reality, right? Yep. So it's like, I can experience a death in the family or I can experience financial hardship, but if I'm able to sit in a meditative state and understand that all of that is all of that's objective, right? Like the event itself did occur. It is a real event. But me saying that it's a negative event for my life is subjective. That is an opinion on the event. It's not understanding that it is simply just something that's happening. It's not happening to me and it's not happening against me. And even when things are going in my way, it's not happening for me. Like I'm just a participant of that event. Exactly. Right. And that's a big concept that I used to do the same thing where I'd be like, oh, I'm just this way because of this, or like if you had it the way I had it, then you would do this too, or like, and it was always just the blame game, right? Yeah. And everything was either good or bad. I'm either up or down. It's either positive or negative, right? But either way, I was very self-centered, right? Like I put myself in the middle of it and said, this event, everything's about me, right? Yep. And so I think that it's so awesome that you're touching on like separating the self from the non-self. Like how can I live more in alignment with reality, right? And It's like, that's not real when I'm just thinking about things just as they pertain to me. That's not reality.
Yeah. And it's, we're meaning-making machines. We make meaning out of everything. So every event that occurs, we make it mean something about ourselves or about somebody else or about the situation itself. When it's, like you said, it's just something that happened. Yeah. And we can just let it be there. And then we can move forward from the standpoint of nothingness, really, like because it didn't mean anything.
Yeah. And I think that's cool too, because it's very in alignment with, like let's say art, right? And like poetry is a form of art. where I think that's why humans, we are spiritual beings, and like we do give meaning to things, right? We have consciousness. That's what we do. And what I think why we have such an importance of art and culture is because it's able to invoke emotions, but it's all like what the painter or the writer intended you to feel and versus what you feel from it. That's art is the experience of it, right? And so it's just like you could write something profound with the intention of me feeling a certain way, and if I read it and it evokes something else, I give it that meaning, and that's why I have an attachment to it. And that's what art's all about, right? And it's like when I spent so many years, right? And like when I was just drinking all the time and like doing all these things, and it was just like I was in this victim mentality, and it's like life was just happening to me. Like I wasn't a participant in my own life. Like I wasn't actively doing things to like, get a more favorable situation for myself. I was just sitting there and I was a victim to everything that happened to me, and I was idle and stagnant, and like it had no meaning because I was just in this headspace where it was all negative.
Yep. And Landmark for me gave me that access to have a life that I love and author, as you were getting at. Like I'm not just living a life that's happening to me. I'm making my life happen the way I want it because I have freedom and power in the transformation that I've had.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's like and it is a choice, right? Like how we respond or react to situations or like how we perceive things is 100% a choice.
Yeah.
Right? It's like the consciousness that we have just like on a human level, like biologically we're the only beings that have that level of consciousness that we know of, right? So it's just like that's what separates us from like all the other animals in the world. And I had someone explain that to me one time, and it really got me thinking, because I'm like, when I just react with raw emotion, or if I just, take the bait and get gaslit in a situation or whatever it is, that's a very primal way of living. Like that's very much like, I'm just like, this is how it made me feel, so I'm going to act that way. Instead of like understanding, it's like, I am a higher level thinking being. It's like, I have the ability to not do that.
Yeah. And we talked about that in the Subway years a lot. Having a customer act a certain way, and then as a manager, my responsibility was telling the employees that it doesn't matter what they do, what they say or think or do. It's just what they're going to say and think or do, and that's all that people are out there doing. They're just saying, thinking, and doing things, and the only thing that matters is our reaction to it. Mm-hmm. And if we just stay calm and and understand that people might be having a bad day or whatever it is, then we can react in a much higher level of consciousness, right?
Right. And it's funny too, man, because like I said, I love that we're talking about this, because I listen to a lot of different like lectures, and I just like I really am trying to get into the space, because I think it's right in alignment with trying to live a sober lifestyle, because sobriety for most people isn't just abstinence. It's about, I want a better life. Like, it's like, I just don't want to keep in this cycle where it's like, I use to the point of destruction, and then I emerge remorseful, and then I have to rebuild just enough to burn it down again. And it's like that cycle of addiction, right? Yeah. And it's like, I didn't get sober just to get out of that. It's like, I wanted to have a better life. So it's like, being sober doesn't make you a good person. It's not going to automatically solve all your problems. What it's going to do is it's going to mitigate the risk of you burning your life to the ground in that continuous cycle that you have experienced time and time again. But there's so much more work to be done after the fact to like get you to where you want to go, right? And it's like, and if your reason for being sober is to have a better life, then there's things you're going to have to do internally to get that, aside from just abstinence from a substance, And I think that's awesome that you're talking about that, man. And so touch a little bit more on like what it looks like at like a Landmark forum and like the community itself.
Okay, well, it's all online. That's my understanding as of now. Doing the forum is an online event. It used to be in person, but you have a forum leader who is well trained and professional, and it's a weekend long course. all day Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then you come back on a Tuesday night after you re-enter the real world on your Monday work day or whatever it is. And it's just an inquiry of self and the past, and trying to get. You can think of life as with 3 filing cabinets. The past, the present, and the future. And a lot of people have their past events filed in their future cabinet, and it's just holding them back. And so, if we can dig in there and grab those files in filed away in the future and get them back there in the past and leave them there, then we can create a better future for ourselves. Maybe not even better, but just new. It's new. It's totally unrecognizable to yourself and others, and you create possibilities. You're creating possibilities all weekend long. You do make some phone calls. I called both of my parents and just told them that I couldn't imagine what it was like to have me as a child, as a son, like having to worry about me and all this, everything that goes into it. And so, there's sort of amends making, if you will, but it's just a weekend long inquiry of self and past, and it leaves you with freedom and power and self-expression to create the possibilities that you want out of your life.
Yeah. And it's so interesting, right? Like look across the board, right? And like, let's take sobriety out of the picture and let's just talk self-improvement, right? Isn't it funny how there's always a component of clearing away the wreckage of your past and then properly putting it like in the past? Right. It's like, you know what I mean? Like regardless of what you're trying to accomplish, like across the board, whether it's religion, whether it's just self-improvement, business development, personal development, there's an aspect of analyzing your past for what it is, usually with a peer or somebody to help you with that process, and then amending what you can to the people that are in your life so you don't have to carry that burden with you, and then properly placing it, like you said, in the past filing cabinet so that you can then move on in a new way. You can have a new way of thinking and transform yourself into something different. Yep. Isn't that crazy?
It is. Or maybe not so much.
Yeah.
Because it's just, that's what it takes. That's what it takes. You got to, and a lot of people don't want to do it because it's, you got to confront yourself. We're always standing in our own way. And that's, whether to get sober, like you said, or to be just more productive or just self-improvement, you're the only one standing in your way.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like all those good ideas when you're laying awake at night and you're thinking about how you're wasting your life and you could be do this, or you really want to do this or whatever. And then you allow the fear to creep in and you don't act on those decisions and you let them put you in a mental prison and you continue on with your life without doing anything about it. When you do the hard work necessary to reflect on yourself internally, you get honest with somebody who's there just to help you out, and you work on those defects that you have, right? And you understand, like, hey, like I can do this. Like I can have a better life.
Yeah.
But it's like nobody was ever in my life holding me down.
Yeah.
No one was ever like, Eric, you will not succeed and we will do everything in our power to not let you succeed. And that's how I thought the world was for a long time. It was always the police officer's fault that he pulled me over when I was drunk. It was always my parents' fault because they walked in on me and I was getting high. It was always everyone else's fault.
Yeah.
But it was like I was the one who was the common denominator in all of those problems. And I was the one sabotaging myself. I was the one holding myself back from what I really wanted to be and what I really wanted to do. And it's like, that's why I think, as alcoholics and addicts specifically, it's so common. We try to move away. Like we think we could just go somewhere where no one knows us and reinvent ourselves, and then like that never works. We just end up a drunk somewhere else.
Right. Yeah, yeah, because you go with you everywhere you go.
Isn't that crazy, man? Well, that's awesome, man. And just before we move on to the poems and stuff, it reminded me that conversation. There's this video of that went pretty viral on TikTok and Instagram where there's this guy and he's just out in a mall. You know what I mean? He's got a little microphone. He's just like asking people questions and stuff. And there's this like real unassuming looking guy, you know, like kind of like a, you know, like a nerdy looking guy with glasses on. And this guy, this YouTuber, like walks up to him with a mic and he's going to ask him like some sort of question. Right. And somebody walks right through them, you know, and like the guy's like, what an asshole, right? Like the YouTuber or whatever. And then this kid says something like so profound, like it's insane. He goes like, it probably wasn't in malice. Like people are just in their own worlds. They're in their own thing. Like you know what I mean? It's like he was probably just so wrapped up in whatever he was doing, didn't even notice or didn't even think to like move out of the way or whatever it is, right? Yep. But that's both sides of the coin is touched on in that situation. One, let's look at like sometimes we're just doing our own thing. We're just thinking about ourselves and we're stepping on everyone else's toes while we do it. And they get angry and they retaliate. And then we get resentful that they're retaliating at us. And it's like this whole little thing, right? Yeah. And then on the other side, it's like that guy intentionally walked in front of me. Like that guy is trying to pick a fight, right? When really he was just in his own world doing our own thing. And that's a lot. He explained a lot about like human interaction and like perception. Right? Mm-hmm. Where it's like, we're selfish beings as humans. It's like most times we're only thinking about ourselves. We're thinking everyone's looking at us. We're thinking, but it's like not the case. We're all just thinking about ourselves. Right. And it's like the fact that he touched on the duality of both sides on like this like real unassuming encounter was, it blew my mind. I watched that. I was like, damn.
Yeah.
That's
crazy.
Great.
Yeah.
Anyways, that was just a little ramble because I thought about it. It was cool though to see that.
I like to refer to that as finding the innocence in people, because if we realize that guy walking through our filming had no idea that we were filming, like he's actually innocent, and if we can find the innocence within that person, we can a lot more easily forgive them.
Yeah,
and it's you gotta be forgiving in this life, I think.
Oh, dude, 100%. Yeah, it's just like, you can't walk around with resentments, man. You know what I mean? You can't hold on to things that deter what you do emotionally, or, it's like a big thing, right? That I always had to learn. It was taking responsibility and accountability for things. And you touched on it earlier, where it's like bad things happen to people. And it's like, I've had some things happen where I didn't have any part in them happening to me. They just happened. But what my part was then I used that experience as an excuse to treat people poorly, or I used that experience to as an excuse to keep burning my life down to the ground. And it's like, and that was my part. My part was allowing that experience to affect me the way that I did, and not doing the work that I needed to like work through it.
Yeah. Yeah. And Landmark helped me see that the events. It helped me see the events as events. It's something that happened. Like, you can go over the worst thing that happened in your life, and your Landmark forum leader will just say, okay, that happened, and your feelings are valid, but what did you make it mean? What did you make it mean about yourself, about your future, about, whoever's close to you? Because you made it mean something.
Yeah,
that's probably a bunch of bullshit. Actually.
Yeah. Did you make it mean something where you learned and you improved yourself, and or did you just weaponize it to terrorize everyone that's close to you because you were upset and you just allowed those emotions to rule over your life?
Yeah, because it didn't actually happen to you, it just happened. Which is what we were talking about earlier.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. It's such a wild concept, and it sounds simple, but to put it in practice, it takes a lot of time. And I have been making a lot of growth in that area of my life, where it's just like, how can I separate the self from the non-self? I don't want to live in the subjective. I want to live in the objective. I want to be with my peers in reality, coexisting together. I don't want to like live life with this warped perception that I'm the most important person in my life. Yeah. And I have like main character syndrome. There's so many times in my life where I literally would be like, if they were making a movie about my life, this would be a cool scene. Like, who thinks that, bro? Like me, dude. I'm like, it's just so like self-consumed and like so selfish sometimes. Like, that's what I'm thinking about. It's crazy though, man. I'm glad we were able to touch on that. Now, let's roll in to the main event, right? the books here. So you recently published Summit Seeking Stories. A Number of Dreams has been out for a while. Before we get into the inspiration and kind of the backstory on them, let's just touch a little bit more on your story, because most of these were written while you were still drinking, little drunken monologues as you would.
Yeah.
And how did you've always been kind of a writer, a poet of some sort. I remember, when I worked for you, man, it's like we had this thing, we'd listen to the classic rock station all the time, and I would hear songs like Time by Pink Floyd, and I always thought wow, that's a real poetic song, and I would always attribute it to you, because you were kind of the same kind of guy, you know what I mean? And you went to school, right? And you've always been just more of a literature kind of guy, and you've always been an artist in your own way, and you've always used that as a way to express yourself. I mean, tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, thank you. Time, one of my all-time favorites, by the way.
Yeah. Wasting away the moments that make up a dull day.
But yeah, I have an English and creative writing degree from the U of A that I got. I graduated in 2007. I received that in 2007 after 9 years of being out of high school. So perseverance can get you there. But yeah, I started writing at an early age. I mean, teens, and just kind of developed from there. I would write at some points in my life. I would write all the time. Plenty of bar napkins filled with writing. Coffee tables. I would write on my own coffee table, not other people's. Maybe other people's. Sorry about that.
Someone probably woke up one morning. It's that's real profound, but it's in Sharpie on my coffee table.
But so just always enjoyed writing as therapy, as a self-expression, and then finally was motivated to actually self-publish some books through Amazon. I did that late last year. Actually, they both came out within about 6 weeks of each other, I think. So one right after the other, and I want to do more, but I got to get motivated again. I did these. This first one, A Number of Dreams, came out as I was finishing up a Landmark seminar, which is seminars are basically continuing education of the Landmark Forum that you can get into seminars and keep your transformation going and growing, because it's not linear. You're not just cured. You have to keep transforming all the time. And so big motivation and a lot of help came through doing the Landmark seminar, and I created a deadline for myself, and I got it out there.
Cool, man. And what percentage would you say of these poems were written while you were still drinking and when you were sober?
Probably this Number of Dreams, the entire book of poetry is probably, I was probably under some sort of influence when I was writing them. Summit Seeking Stories has a sober period of my life where it's more motivational and inspirational writings, and probably half of it was during a sober period of my life.
What I would like to do is I'd like to read one from each, maybe one that was written, under the influence of something, and then one that was written in a sober state. So maybe we'll start with A Number of Dreams.
Yeah, because you can pick any one, and it was definitely under the influence.
This one's interesting. Demons on snow machines.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, guys, let's do it. I'm excited for this. Tell me what you think of pink in the summer. The stink of wet lumber dying in the cold sun and cracking like its grain is trying to run south. My mouth is dry and my tongue has been scraped of the taste. I hate to think that any part of my life was a waste. You always hated when I told you stories of the green monster in late October. You always hoped your father would come home sober. 5 Fridays a month, he wished he'd had a son, but What's done is done, he always said. In his head, he thought you were as good as dead. Red was your color then, anger, shame, embarrassment. Love, not even sometimes, until I showed you how a sunrise can turn the sky tie-dyed and tired eyes see things differently. As you woke from your slumber and chased the demons in your dreams away, you came to realize when life unravels at the seams, you can use a needle to stitch the patterns back together, whether or not it's 6 o'clock in the evening or in the AM. Lately, I've been locked up thinking, stopped drinking, stocked up on love loss, and hopped up on dream shot. And I thought for a moment that if things go wrong, it won't be long now. We could still go down to that place on the lake, where we used to dream of demons on snow machines and monsters on speedboats. We could let ourselves float above the pain, just underneath the happiness and feel the breeze, like tree leaves, and simply get stuck in limbo with ease. Wow. That was a pretty good one to read. Like told you stories of the green monster in late October. Wow, man. I mean, touch a little bit on that. What was the inspiration behind that? It sounds like you were kind of talking to someone who was close to you, maybe.
Well, there was a little bit baseball reference there.
Yeah.
It's hearing that was nice because I don't think I've ever heard it read to me. But I think I was probably thinking of past relationships. It sounds a lot like a father-son relationship or a father-daughter relationship because it was.
Yeah, there was definitely elements of maybe a father-daughter relationship.
Yeah.
You were probably speaking to a significant other that was going through some of those things, and just talk about how she would always feel the color red, the anger, the shame, but never love.
Yeah.
Or her father wishes she had a son. And
right.
You would tell her stories about the Red Sox and a postseason run, and you would want to escape to that place by the lake where you guys would just, dream things up. And that was it was a great poem.
Thank you.
It was a great poem. I love that. So,
I like the meaning you're making for it because I don't know, I really don't know, what even was going on. And, just hearing you say those things is great because yes, it has elements of those and, you can read something like that and just make it mean whatever you want.
Well, that's the beauty of art. It's art itself. Art in its truest nature is subjective at its core because it's like we said, it's like what makes a painting valuable? What makes a song meaningful? What makes a poem impactful? It's not what the writer's intention for it was. It was what the consumer, the listener, the viewer. It's the meaning that they give it. Right?
Yeah.
That makes it significant to them. And that's where the value of art comes from. That's why it's like art and culture are synonymous because it's just humans expressing themselves on different mediums and it invokes something in others. But it's, we decide what that means to us.
And it's imitating life because if you think of that event that occurred as just art, because it probably was beautiful in its nature some way, except that we made it mean this horrific thing about ourselves or the event had no intention on you.
And it's so cool that
you
we're talking
made it
about
significant.
Yeah. And it's like, dude, read that poem, right? And there's I could be like, wow, this is a love poem. This is a poem about how this man was accepting his significant other for where she was at and understanding of why she probably is the way she is and felt the way she felt because of the relationship dynamic with her father. And he just wanted to remind her of this pure, innocent place by the lake where they were safe from all of that, right?
Yeah.
Or it could go the other way, right? And I could be like, wow, this is just a really painful poem where this guy's just expressing what he's seeing this person he cares about, this female he cares about go through, right? And he just wants her to go back to that place of innocence and that place where they're together sharing that moment, but she's so stuck in the game, in the anger and the embarrassment and the shame. So it's just you could look at it both ways, and that's what makes poetry, that's what makes music, art so meaningful is because we decide that.
Yeah.
Wow, dude, that was a good one. Okay, now I'm going to read one from Summit Seeking Stories. Now, before I read this, let's talk about it. Summit Seeking Stories. There is a very interesting background because this is a combination of poems written by you and photography, right? From Christy Brooks. Now tell us how you know Christy, how you got reconnected with her, and what inspired you guys to create this book of poetry and photos.
Yeah, Christy Brooks is a childhood friend of mine, or a teenage friend of mine. I'm not sure exactly when we met. But we grew up in the same area, went to different schools, but everything's so close up there that we knew each other. And I had noticed on her social media that she had gotten sober and started climbing mountains, like with a vengeance, like climbing mountains every day. And I remember, I believe she started in not the winter months, and all I could think about is, what is she going to do when it starts snowing out and there's 2 feet of snow? And that time came, and she just kept climbing, and I was so inspired by that, and that I felt like I needed to do something, because she would always take photographs of her hikes and post them. And so I reached out to her and said, "Hey, I love your photos. They're great. I love what you're doing, and I wanna create something with you." And so I have this idea of using your photography with my original writing and just creating it, putting it in a book so it'll last forever.
That's awesome. And she is sober, and she, from what I know, from what you've told me, she had cirrhosis of the liver. She had a lot of health complications, and when she overcame that and got sober, that's a big part of her platform, a big part of what she does with hiking every day and the photographs.
Yeah, she was having health issues that, dictated she stopped drinking, and she got sober, and she claims her mountains as her gymnasium and her inspiration and everything it takes to stay sober.
Wow. Her camera's the brush, the mountain's her canvas. That's awesome. I used to say this thing, little sidebar. Like I said, we worked together at a Subway, and I used to always say I'm a sandwich artist, and the bread is my canvas. So yeah, just thought I'd share that with you guys. But I was flipping through this before we started filming, and there was one that caught my eye on page 23, and I wanted to read this for you. It's called Responsibility, and it's paired with Wolf's Neck Woods State Park in Freeport, Maine. And it's this beautiful picture of this dock, right? Looks like in the summer months, the sun, very radiant, very calm waters. There's a boat off the dock from a perspective as if you were standing right behind this bush. It's a very serene picture. I was just taking it in. And the poem that's paired with it is Responsibility. With free will comes responsibility, and if we define responsibility as the willingness to accept ourselves as cause in the matter, whatever the matter may be, we can come to understand that we really are the creators of our own life. Destiny is a 4-letter word disguised behind 3 syllables. If we can break through the mental barriers of what it is we think we don't deserve, we can start to achieve the things we once thought impossible. Remember that the decisions we make today affect the rest of our lives and the lives of those around us. Surround yourself with positive people and begin to attract what it is you desire. Shifts happen. Change your thoughts and change your life. Change your life and do your part to help others change theirs. Wow. Now that is a stark difference between the demons on snow machines and responsibility. And it's so cool because, I'll just share what I got out of that. I'm reading that, and it's almost like I feel like you were talking to yourself. Sometimes when we create, when we're in a creative state where we're trying to manifest what we have in our heads, right? Because I consider myself a visionary, and I say that term loosely, and sometimes I'm joking and laughing about it, but it's true, right? I think for people who create, for people who go out there and try to find a way to express themselves, there's something that we want to invoke, an emotion or something. And a lot of the time when I create and when I'm doing things, it's just I'm trying to tell myself something, right? And that's what I got from that, right? Is like I feel like you're trying to tell yourself, like, remember, man, like you are responsible for yourself. You're responsible for how you interact with the world. You are responsible to wake up every day and participate in your own life.
Yeah. Yeah. Responsibility as the willingness to accept yourself as cause in the matter, no matter what the matter. Responsibility is something I probably shied away from my entire life. What do you want me to do about it? It's not my fault. It's not my problem. I'm over here doing my own thing. And when I started to think about the possibilities that could occur if I became responsible for myself and for others, then I started to see that there was a lot possible. Long-lasting relationships, sober living, holding down a job and not just holding it down, but being effective and growing within the company, being financially stable. There's a lot of possibilities come when responsibility is taken for yourself and even for others.
I love that. Responsibility is accepting. What was? Let me read it again.
The willingness to accept yourself as cause in the matter.
That's incredible. Let me read that again.
I'm sure I didn't come up with that. I don't think it's plagiarized, but it's probably. Yeah. I mean, it's been written somewhere, I'm sure.
I mean, it inspired me. I mean, responsibility as if we define responsibility as the willingness to accept ourselves as cause in the matter, whatever the matter may be, we can come to understand that we really are the creators of our own lives. It's like if we can look at ourselves with such an honest lens to accept the fact that we are the barriers to where we want to go, we are the ones holding ourselves back, and we are the ones causing all the stuff that's going on in our lives by simply how we're designating it, how we're perceiving it, how we're deciding how to look at things is what's holding us back in life.
Yeah.
And it's like
the meaning that we're giving everything.
Yeah.
So be responsible for creating the meaning or for not creating a meaning surrounding a certain situation or event.
And it's crazy because for people trying to get sober, right, which that's just the context of the podcast, right? It's like everyone listening to this podcast has some sort of a problem with substance abuse, and they're trying to figure out what works for other people, right? And regardless of the route you want to go to, if you go to treatment and you work the 12 steps, or if you get inspired at a landmark forum and you join that community, or if you just simply wake up one day and decide that that's not the life you want to live anymore and you start doing things to better your life.
Like hiking mountains.
And taking pictures of it, whatever that looks like, at some point, you have to take responsibility for what you're doing. You have to take responsibility for how you interact with the world. And you have to understand that you will never accomplish anything worthwhile in life under the guise that you are not at fault, under the guise that it's all circumstantial. And if this wouldn't have happened, or if that wouldn't have happened, it's like people who find great meaning and great purpose in life are not finding it at all. They're designating it. They're changing the way they interact with life, and they get more favorable results because they change the way they interact with life instead of waiting for life to bend to their will and waiting for things to change to how they want it. They just simply changed what they could, which was their perception, their attitudes, and their actions.
Yep. And a lot of times your situations may stay the same, but because you have a new perception of it, then your whole life can change. Even though you're still living in the same place, you're still working at the same job, you still have the same family or friends or whatever. Maybe your friends change eventually, but or the people you surround yourself with change, but you may still have all those same things, but your outlook is totally different, and
the outcomes are different.
Yeah, results.
You know what I mean? And it's like, so I oversee 14 sober living homes, right? And what we're talking about is prevalent because everybody in there is trying to find recovery and sobriety from drugs and alcohol, right? And as drug addicts and alcoholics, we're masters of being victims. We're masters of manipulation. Yeah. We're masters of the narcissistic tendencies that everything's happening to us and all that stuff that we've been talking about. When it comes to people that struggle with addiction, that specific class of people struggle with that the most, you know? And it's crazy because that example could be used perfectly. Two guys could be in a sober living house. They both get a job at Circle K, right, at a gas station. And one guy's perceiving it as, oh, woe is me, the world's holding me down. Right. If I wouldn't have done that, then I wouldn't have gone to treatment, and then I wouldn't be here in this sober living and working at this Circle K. And that guy is not content. That guy has no purpose. That guy is waking up every day and he is just a victim of whatever is happening, right? He's susceptible to life, right?
Yeah. His pain is bigger than his purpose.
Yeah. And then you have another guy, the other guy who works there, lives in the same house, works the same job, but he wakes up every day and he says, this is an opportunity for me to grow. This is an opportunity for me to live in a structured environment, to get the help that I need, to do the work that I need to do on myself. And I have this job that can provide me the funds to pay my rent and to do these things so I can get to where I want to go.
Yep.
And they're in the same situation. They were dealt the same cards. They make the same amount of money. They live in the same environment. But one guy is defining the meaning and one guy is not. You know?
The one's taking responsibility.
Yeah.
The other isn't. It's simple. It's simple when you look at it that way. It's hard to get there, but.
Oh, yeah. They're all simple concepts to understand.
Yeah.
But self-knowledge avails us nothing. Right? It's like, what do we do with it? You know how many times I knew I was an alcoholic? Like I knew I had a problem. Like I knew this was something I couldn't do and I just kept doing it.
Yeah. And that's where Landmark helped me, because we're talking about the difference between informational and transformational. We're just going to add more stuff to what we already know, and then we're going to keep doing the same things that we always do, even though we know we shouldn't be doing them. Whereas if we can be transformational, we can use that knowledge to transform, to break down, to inquire, to the whys and the hows, and to grow from there, and just squash all that stuff and move on.
Yeah. Well, that was incredible, man. We'll kind of start wrapping up the episode here, but I just wanted to first say thank you for coming on. That was incredible. We were able to read a couple of your poems, learn more about Landmark, and it was just a very good conversation. What I love most about the life that I live today is I'm fortunate enough to be in a position where I can financially support myself and live a quality life and also have conversations like this with cool people at noon on a Wednesday. Like that's what I do for a living. Like guys, it is noon on a Wednesday and I'm in a podcast studio reading very powerful poetry, talking about the power of taking responsibility for your life. Like, I mean, if that's not living the dream, I don't know what is for me. And that's the meaning that I give to my life.
Yeah. I mean, I brought my 4-year-old to the fair last night and we got home late and we had a rough time getting to school, but I used some of these tools to help me get us to school, and then drove up here all by noon. And that's one thing that would never have been possible for me 7 years ago.
Yeah.
It just wouldn't.
Yeah, it's incredible, man. The power of transformation. If you are watching this and when we're talking about being a victim, that's resonating and it's not sitting right with you and it kind of strikes an emotion. Look at that. That's called spiritual axiom. And what that means is it's a certainty that anytime you find discontentment with a person, place, or thing, it is just an outward reflection of where you're at internally. So if that's you and you feel like you're a victim to life and you feel like you were dealt the wrong cards and you feel like nobody else could understand what you're going through and that you're terminally unique, you need to take what we have spoken here today and apply it to your life. Take responsibility for the meaning that you give things. Take time to be still. Take time to be quiet. Lower your heart rate through controlled breathing and try to connect to something on a spiritual level and detach yourself from the subjective and live in the objective and start participating in your own life. And if you can do that, then you have a chance of doing the work necessary to not only overcome your addiction, but live a better, more purposeful, more meaningful life.
Yeah, be the author of the life you love and live. Be alive.
Be alive. Join us. Participate. Give freely of what you find and join us. We shall be with you in the fellowship of the Spirit. That was awesome.
Amen.
Yeah.
And I don't say that often.
Yeah. That was awesome. So, guys, if you were watching this and you said, I need to read these poems, I need to get tapped into what they're doing here. Summit Seeking Stories and A Number of Dreams, available on Amazon. We'll have the links right here on the screen. You'll also be able to click into them below in the episode description. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, it will also be linked in the description. You can click in. It'll take you right there. I'm telling you, man, he could use the support. And after reading just those couple, I know I need to do a better job. I need to get myself a copy and read the in its entirety. That was really powerful stuff. We'll also link Christy Brooks's social media in the episode description as well. Follow her journey. I'm telling you, really powerful stuff. One day, maybe we'll get her on the podcast because I feel like that's a story that needs to be told as well. So, and Mike, thank you so much for stopping by.
Thank you.
Always a pleasure. The spirit of the great white. They can't swim backwards. Neither do we.
That's right.
We take all of our past files that are sitting misfiled in the future. We clear that away. We put them where they need to be, and we create the future that we want to live, man. And I love that. Guys, a couple of announcements before we wrap up here. First and foremost, the Otter God Pod is growing rapidly, and we appreciate all the love that you guys are giving us. And some exciting news: we will be traveling to St. Louis, Missouri in a couple of weeks, and we will be shooting. And I'm bringing obviously I'm not gonna bring the studio with me, but I'm bringing the mics, I'm bringing the cameras, and I'm going on the road to interview a guy who's created a software that is revolutionizing the way people manage sober living houses across the country. He's in recovery himself, a graduate of the University of Washington, and he's done a lot of cool stuff. And I am flying out to go do an episode with him in his startup's office right in downtown St. Louis. So that is really cool. And I am also trying to do some things where at least every couple of months we're traveling somewhere. We're taking the podcast across the country, and we're finding more people in sobriety that are living meaningful lives and are doing things that are impactful. So a lot of cool things coming up, man. And it's all thanks to you guys listening to our stuff, subscribing to the channels, and just supporting us any way you can. So we do appreciate it. And lastly, just a quick message from the sponsor of the pod, Plugged In Recovery, network of sober living homes in Phoenix, Arizona. We have 8 male, 3 female houses. If you're listening to this and you want some more information for yourself or a loved one, give us a call, 602-919-4242, or visit www.azsober.com. Thank you guys so much. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
We'll see you next week.